And then there were two. Sydney and the Brisbane Lions, two sides looking for grand final redemption, but only one can salute and be crowned premiers for 2024. Who will it be? We're going to unpack the biggest game of the year right here on Access All Areas, thanks to Crypto.com. Happy Grand Final week. It is great to have your company as I welcome in Damian, Barrett and Matthew Lloyd. And Damo, I guess if this season is any indication, this grand final is going to go down to the wire.
I think it will, Nat, won't it? And it already has this year between these two teams. I reckon in round 19 at the Gabba, they put on a home and away season epic, and I feel it's going to be a repeat. That one was won by the Lions by 2 points when the Swans had a lot of injuries in it, and I love what they did in that game, and I reckon we're going to repeat on Saturday.
Lloyd, you know what it's like to be in a grand final week. It's special, but it's crazy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You have to limit the distractions, but the good thing for both these sides is that most players have played in the grand final with Sydney and the Brisbane Lions, and what I love about it, match winners absolutely everywhere in these two sides.
Yeah, there certainly are. Let's recap how both of these teams got to this point, and we'll start with the Sydney Swans. And we do have to go back to 2 years ago when they were absolutely smashed by Geelong in a grand final. It was John Longmire's third grand final loss, Damo. Do you think that plays on some of the players' minds?
They did debrief it, Nat, and they fully thrashed it out. And yes, I mean, it will be in their minds at some stage this week. And obviously, the loser of this grand final from a coaching perspective is going to be dealing with more trauma because Chris Fagan lost a grand final by a kick last year. And as you pointed out, John Longmire has lost his past 3 grand finals. So that's the negative element of it. And that was the most recent of those negatives. And then you get to the actual season itself in 2024, and they exploded pretty much out of the blocks, didn't they? They got off to a really good start, 14 wins and 1 loss, and looked unstoppable, and then some problems hit, Lloyd.
Yeah, no doubt. The football they were playing is breathtaking. I remember Sam Mitchell at the end of this game just said we're being taught a lesson, absolute lesson, and we're a long way off, and they were the best by a mile. And then I just was wondering through, this is the first loss they had where Logan McDonald didn't make the distance, and then look at that 1 win and 5 losses through a period of time. And there were concerns, there was doubts within the organisation, and it took this game against Collingwood where, and then the injuries started, Damon?
This was the epic game I'm referring to. I mean, Papley went down and wasn't seen again until finals. They fell short, and then they had that disastrous 100-plus point loss to Port Adelaide. And then this was the turning point, Lotto, again, wasn't it? You know, internally, they needed this.
Yeah, I bumped into an administrator the morning after this game, and he said, we are so relieved that this last quarter happened. It's what we need as a football club, and they've gone on and won 5 in a row from this point. So I just wonder, was it that they were that far in front in terms of 4 or 5 games clear or whatever it was, and you just hold yourself back a little bit because you're just waiting for the finals to come around, or are Brisbane in better form at this time of the year? So that's what Saturday's going to be so intriguing for.
Do you feel like the Swans are back to their best now?
Well, I don't think they're playing as well as they were early in the year, because let's not forget against the Giants. The Giants were the better side in that first final for the first 3 quarters. But what I saw on Friday night against Port, it was men v boys, chalk and cheese, just how good the Swans were.
So while John Longmire searches for his second flag, of course winning one in 2012, Chris Fagan is looking for his very first, and if he does get it, Damo, he will be the first coach to have never played league football to win a premiership, and they came so close last year.
Well, they all but won the game last year, didn't they? I mean, the ball was in their forward 50 again when the siren went effectively, and they all stood up in the moments, and they just weren't able to actually get the win. So they're going to get a positive outcome of that. They came to the MCG and performed against the biggest club in the land on that day. So while the result went against them, their actual form didn't. So it stacks up, and the whole Chris Fagan storyline, that the 53, 54-year-old coach that came into the system untried, and then to have 2 seasons, 2017 and 18, 5 wins in both of those seasons, and then 6 years of finals performances in a row, and dealing with the adversity that's been over his head for 2 years this week to the week 2 years ago when the Hawthorn racism saga started publicly, and he's endured so much, and he's got this team back to the big game.
What about 13 of their last 15 games? That's a wonderful form line heading into this grand final.
Yeah, it certainly is. And after that round 11 loss to Hawthorn, Chris Fagan, well, he didn't lose faith, and he knew this team could turn it around. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, I think that I've got a positive outlook towards the second half of the season. I've got no reason to doubt their ability to fight back. I can assure you of one thing: we'll be trying to. Whether we get there or not's another thing, but that'll be our aim, is to have a better second half of the year than we've had a first half of the year.
So, Lloydie, their resilience has been tested a number of times. They've had 4 ACL injuries as well. They've lost players and obviously that poor start to the year and the grand final trauma as well. But they've just, I guess, stuck fat together.
Yeah, the talent's always been there. That was the frustration with the Brisbane Lions. But Lee Matthews often says you're speaking to your players a lot of the time. And Chris Fagan, I reckon deep down he would have really been worried. He even says there, I think during the week, he said, I didn't think we'd make the grand final, probably the way he was feeling at that period of time. But you're selling hope, you're selling belief. And so many players have spoken about Chris Fagan putting stats up to say we're going as well as last year. It's just our goal kicking and a few bits and pieces here or there. And they've all hung to that and hardly missed a beat since then.
Those 5 ACLs you referred to, they obviously got Ashcroft back this
Yes.
year. He was one of the 5 at the time. But imagine if they had Kitty Coleman available for this game. He was best on ground at half-time of last year's grand final and then went down before half-time of the first game this season. So, yeah, I think if he was available, it'd be a different preview to this match.
So let's turn our attention to Saturday's grand final. Of course, Katy Perry is the pre-game entertainer.
You're excited about that, aren't you, Nat?
I am very excited about that. But Lloyd, do you think when we look at this game, it's going to be a battle of control versus chaos?
Yeah, I do believe that. And Sydney can go as quick as anybody with the football when they need to, but they are more measured in their build-up. There's more structure to what they do than the Brisbane Lions. Like the Brisbane Lions play to me a lot more on instinct, whereas Sydney are more measured. So, yeah, they'll go when the time is right. But I found this really intriguing on Friday night because Port's pressure overwhelmed Hawthorn. Sydney didn't allow for that pressure to build on them because of this. They just controlled the ball, built the ball up and took that out of the equation in that sense. They just swung it to the open side and Port didn't have the answers. So this is what the game, I believe. Yeah, Sydney can do all facets. They're tough as well, but this is a type of game I believe they'll want to play rather than the chaotic type game that Brisbane wants.
Does it limit their scope to bring the ball in through that 45-degree angle kick, Lloyd, when you're playing that slowly though?
They still can do it quickly. You can still move the ball quickly, so they don't just go back behind the mark all the time. They can go in so many different tempos, the Sydney Swans.
So the Brisbane Lions banner caught our eye. This was pre-game before the preliminary final against Geelong. We're on thin ice. It's time to dance. And Lloydie, that's been a motto of the Lions for the second half of the season. And do you think that's given them their biggest weapon in the chaos game?
Yeah, it has. And so full credit to Chris Fagan again, because the players have hung on to this. So he said, we're on thin ice here. We're struggling to make the finals at this point in time when he spoke about around that round 11 period. So let's dance. Let's not play safe football. Let's go for it and let's attack. And in the last 2 finals, Damo, they've been in trouble and they've played this sort of footy and it's overwhelmed the opposition.
Well, they were 25 points down in this game we're watching early in the third quarter, and that came off a match, as we know, and then celebrated on this show last week where they were 44 points down against GWS in a semi-final. So, yeah, when they need to dance and when the ice is thin, that's when they're at their most dangerous. And there will be moments in this grand final where they're going to have to just hit go like they've done in the last 2 weeks.
Well, one man the Lions will be without is their number 1 ruckman in Oscar McInerney. Just devastating scenes for him when he went down and dislocated his shoulder not once but twice against the Cats. And this was coach Chris Fagan after the game.
Probably reckon when you've double dislocated your shoulder in a preliminary final, you're not going to be playing in the grand final, which is a real pity because he's just been so enormous for us. It'll give somebody else an opportunity, someone like a Darcy Ford or a Henry Smith. So we've got players ready to come in. I think we're okay injury-wise outside of that. We'll have some blokes this week that won't do much during the week, but they'll be right for the weekend. But yeah, Oscar, it's a real pity because he means so much to us. He's a pretty simple O, but he's a much-loved character at our footy club.
Just a massive loss, in terms of importance. He'd be in the top 3, 4 because of the type of role they play. They're irreplaceable. You nearly keep only one strong ruckman or great ruckman on your list and the rest are just backup, and that's what's unfortunately happened to Brisbane. Have to bring in guys who haven't played all season. So that's why I'm swinging the Swans' way. That's how big this loss is for Brisbane Lions.
So you wouldn't stick with Joe Daniher. You're thinking either a Darcy Ford, who's only played 2 AFL games this year, or Henry Smith, who's played the back last 4 games of the season.
Yeah, Joey will do a lot of ruck work, but it then puts too much pressure on Eric Hipwood, and then suddenly Tom McCartan's going to be laying off, so that's where they do need to bring in.
It's one thing to get through a half of footy on the run with that adversity, but to then prepare for a grand final with that adversity, how's that changed psychologically, Lloyd? And what does it also do to Brodie Grundy? Does it even create more pressure on him to need to dominate that space?
Like, he's had 800 hit-outs for the year, McInerney, so Brisbane Lions midfielders can just plan and prepare where's the ball going. They can't do that anymore. They've pretty much got to probably read Grundy's hits. So suddenly you're a bit more reactive than proactive because you haven't got a gun ruckman rucking for you.
Looking at the Swans now, Damo, and they've got 3 big, tall forwards. Logan McDonald obviously has a bit of an injury cloud with an ankle issue. He didn't train yesterday. Joel Amati and Hayden McLean. But do we trust them to stand up on the big stage?
Well, they stood up in the second biggest stage, Nat, on this Friday night. I mean, the preliminary final's nearly as big as a grand final when you talk about pressure and what's at stake. And they were all there early in the game. I mean, McDonald particularly, they all play their roles. And if you go back through finals, and this is just as we talk about this is what they've done this year from a goals perspective, and they've got so much assistance from their midfielders, obviously Warner and Heaney, and their smaller forwards in Papley and Hayward as well. But 2022, they had Buddy Franklin, you know, the focus and the pressure, and he didn't perform. 2016, same thing. He rolled an ankle early in the game. But this year, under the John Longmire plan, with those 3 lesser light tools, there's no expectation on any one of those individuals to kick more than 2 goals in the game. So I think it's a plus for them in that space.
And Lloydie, one man they'll be looking to is Tom Papley because he's such a barometer and a fire starter for them. Is there a role for someone like a Brandon Starcevic to play here?
Yeah, there is. And if I'm the Brisbane Lions, you can focus on like 2 or 3 players. You don't want to go any more than that because then you lose what you want to do. So the 2 players I'd be going after at the Sydney Swans are Tom Papley and Isaac Heaney. They're the 2 players I'd put heavy focus on, and Starcevic is the man for it. You know, this is his role on Toby Green late in the season, round 22, where he kept him to 4 disposals. Green had a better game against him the next time around when they played, but I think he'll try and get under the skin of Tom Papley. You see what Papley's doing to the opposition. He's upsetting them. He's bringing that energy.
Such
and
an
that's what
agitator,
Starcevic should try and shut down early on.
Oh, we love Tom Papley. Can't wait to see what he does in a grand final. But you can't stop all of the Swans stars, can you? Because Isaac Heaney is another one that they need to keep tabs on, Damo. And maybe it's Josh Dunkley who spent some time because he spent some time on Patrick Dangerfield.
Yeah, I thought he was really big in this prelim final, Nat. Look, Dangerfield had moments, absolutely, and is one of the better Geelong players. But Dunkley, from go to woe of this game, was just there with his leadership. And Chris Fagan has early in the season described him as the player most like Luke Hodge from a leadership perspective. So yeah, I'd imagine he's going to get one of those responsibility roles.
Time now for a Crypto.com bold call. And Damo, there's one that needs to be made around Cal Mills, Sydney's captain.
Yeah, just coming at this from the perspective of the no frills and the no distractions policy of the Swans all year. Now, this is emotional. The captain of the footy club not playing in a preliminary final, having missed the first 17, 18 games with a shoulder injury sustained in a Mad Monday incident. He hadn't been playing well. He wasn't good in the qualifying final and he's now got to have to play in a grand final if he is to with a 17-day break. I'd be making the call earlier in the week rather than later, Lloyd, because it fits in with the whole John Longmire no distractions in 2024. He even dealt with the Dean Cox interest from West Coast in the coaching perspective inside a week and made that go away. So I can't imagine him dragging this out.
No, and what Chris Scott did 2 years ago with Max Holmes, he was fit and he still said, past the fitness, he still said you're not playing. And I think that's the way the Swans should go as well. I'd go Robbie Fox, the fit player, over Callum Mills.
And in 2022, they took Sam Reid in and he was gone before it even started. And they had issues in 2016 with Mills himself with a hamstring and also Jared McVeigh. So he knows the pitfalls of this situation.
There's going to be some heartbreak, always is, in grand final week. Before I get to your tips, Damo, this grand final might appear to be a non-Victorian grand final, but of course it is far from that because we know the links between South Melbourne and the Sydney Swans and of course Brisbane and Fitzroy.
Yeah, look, ultimately it is a Sydney and New South Wales and Brisbane Queensland game, Matt, and that is a beautiful part of this AFL storyline. But they do have rich heritage here in Victoria, and this is the 1996 game, the last game for Fitzroy, where the AFL killed them off and forced them to have an arrangement with Brisbane. Now, it wasn't good early days from a Melbourne-based supporters perspective, but it's become really good recently, and the Swans have always had that hard link to South Melbourne. So it's a great part of the background.
And Lloydie, you were a Fitzroy supporter.
Yeah, I love Fitzroy. Bernie Quinlan, first game I ever went to, he kicked 9 goals and I was a Fitzroy supporter. Absolutely loved my last hero was Richard Osborne and Alistair Lynch, so it was great times back then.
1899, the last time South Melbourne and Fitzroy played off in a grand final. So it does have special significance for many. Grand final tips and predictions. Lloydie, let's start with you.
It's been really tough, Nat. Like, I've swung back and forth, but I've settled on the Swans because they've been the best side all year. And I think with the attention Goulden and Heaney get, I think Warner's a star as well.
You got my man.
I know. I knew.
No surprise that Damo's gone, the Chad.
Well, I went for the Chad in 2022 and he got votes in 2022 as a 20-year-old, I think, Nat, so in the Norm Smith, so I reckon he'll get it this year.
The heart says Brisbane, and I would like to see them get redemption, but I think Sydney might be too good. Errol Goulden for Norm Smith for mine. And that is all we have time for on Access All Areas this week. Enjoy Grand Final week. We will see you again next Monday to unpack a massive Grand Final. In the meantime, have a great week.
Want to get all the latest footy news in one hit? From injuries to breaking news, the latest from the coaches, the Footy Feed team has you covered. Watch it now on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app or wherever you get your podcasts.